Friday nights had become more of an obligation than a pleasure. I had taken my wife, Serena, and our daughter, Lily, out for dinner like I always did. It wasn't about enjoying family time anymore. Those days were long gone. Now, it was just another routine, one I maintained because it was easier than dealing with the backlash of not doing it. Serena liked to keep up appearances, and as long as I was still the one footing the bill, she was happy to let me tag along like an outsider in my own family. We were seated at our usual table in the corner of a high-end restaurant, one that Serena had specifically chosen because of its exclusivity. She liked to feel important, to be seen in places where the wealthy dined, where she could sip her overpriced wine and pretend that she had built her success all on her own. I let her have that illusion. It wasn't worth arguing over. Serena was in an especially good mood that evening. "I just closed a huge deal today," she said, swirling her wine glass in her hand. "The boutique is thriving. I knew this supplier was the right move. You wouldn't understand, but this is a big deal." Lily, our 10-year-old daughter, grinned as she mimicked her mother's posture, tilting her glass of juice in the same exaggerated swirl. "Mom's business is amazing," she said, giggling. I barely acknowledged them, nodding absent-mindedly while my eyes wandered toward the window. I had heard this speech before. Serena loved to act as though she had built her empire from scratch, but I knew the truth. Every part of her boutique, the funding, the rent, the inventory, was covered by me. Every financial misstep she made was quietly corrected by my money. Every success she claimed was something I had subsidized. I sighed quietly, looking out onto the street. That's when I saw him. An old man sat hunched on a bench outside, his thin coat offering little protection from the cold. A small cart rested beside him, filled with plastic bags, old blankets, and what I assumed were all his possessions. He wasn't begging, wasn't calling attention to himself, just sitting there, staring at nothing, the weight of life pressing down on him. I flagged down our server. "Could you pack an extra meal for takeout?" It was a simple request, but the moment I said it, I felt Serena stiffen beside me. She let out a long, dramatic sigh, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the table in irritation. "Oh, here we go again," she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. I ignored her. I was used to her dismissiveness, the way she sneered at small gestures of kindness as if they were foolish or embarrassing. I had long stopped trying to explain why it mattered. The server returned a few minutes later with a neatly packed takeout bag. I stood, ready to step outside and hand it to the man. And that's when it happened. Serena's voice, sharp and cutting, rang through the restaurant, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Even homeless people have more worth than you." I stopped mid-step. Lily laughed. Not a nervous, uncertain laugh. A genuine one. A mocking one. My daughter. I turned slightly, catching the amused look on Serena's face, the way she sipped her wine, completely unbothered. I looked at Lily, my little girl who once held my hand with unwavering trust, now grinning at me with the same condescending smirk her mother had perfected. A slow, hollow ache spread in my chest, but I didn't react. I refused to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I walked outside, my grip tightening on the takeout bag. The cold air hit my face as I approached the old man. He looked up, eyes tired and sunken, filled with the kind of exhaustion that only comes from a lifetime of hardship. I handed him the meal. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then, slowly, he took it, his fingers trembling. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse from the cold. I managed a small nod before turning away, heading back inside. Serena barely glanced at me when I sat back down. Lily giggled again. They thought it was funny. I finished my meal in silence. I paid the bill, and then I drove them home, listening to Serena ramble about her boutique while Lily played games on her phone in the back seat. I had known for a long time that our marriage was broken beyond repair. But tonight, something shifted inside me. The way they laughed. The cruelty in it. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was contempt. And I knew then, this wasn't my family anymore. Serena and Lily had built their own world, one where I was nothing more than a wallet. A joke. A disposable presence they tolerated only because I was useful. But they had no idea that their use was about to run out. A month later, they weren't laughing anymore. Our marriage had been dead for years, though I had been the last to admit it. I used to tell myself that all couples go through rough patches, that love ebbs and flows, that every strained conversation, every eye roll, every dismissive comment was just a temporary storm we'd eventually sail through. But now, after years of pretending, I saw the truth. There was no storm. There was just wreckage. Serena and I had once been happy, or at least I thought we had. But looking back, I realized it had never been love, just convenience. For her, at least. The way she saw it, I was the perfect foundation for the life she wanted. I had ambition, stability, and a steady career that promised her a life of security and indulgence. I was someone she could use. And for the first few years, I didn't notice. I mistook her sharp wit for charm, her ambition for drive, her expensive taste for sophistication. But as time went on, the cracks began to show. I had spent the last 10 years building a business from the ground up. Serena, meanwhile, had been busy building herself. Not a family, not a partnership, herself. She wasn't interested in my struggles, my exhaustion, my sacrifices. She was only interested in the results. She loved the money I made, but she resented the fact that I never fit into her world of endless brunches, luxury spas, and designer wardrobes. She loved that I provided. She hated that I existed. The signs were always there. The signs had been there for years. I just hadn't wanted to see them. The way she dismissed me in conversations, as if my words weren't worth listening to. The way she sighed when I suggested something simple for a date night, as if I were an embarrassment to be seen with. The way she spoke about me to her friends when she thought I wasn't listening, mocking, belittling, laughing. I had ignored them all, told myself she was just stressed, that she was going through something, that things would get better if I just worked harder, made more money, did more for her, made myself more worthy of her attention. But the truth? Nothing would ever be enough, because she never wanted me, just what I could give her. Lily, the innocent observer. The worst part wasn't Serena. I could accept that my marriage was a lie. I could accept that my wife had never truly loved me. But Lily? That was harder. She was only 10, young enough to still be innocent, but old enough to see. And what she had seen, for years, was a mother who constantly mocked her father. A mother who rolled her eyes whenever I spoke. A mother who taught her daughter, intentionally or not, that men were nothing more than providers to be tolerated. And now, Lily was following in her mother's footsteps. At first, it had been small things. The way she ignored me when I spoke to her, keeping her eyes on her tablet like I was a passing noise in the background. The way she laughed at Serena's jokes when they were made at my expense. The way she had laughed at me in that restaurant. I had excused it, thinking, she's just a child. She doesn't understand. But children learn from what they see. And what she had seen was a father who was treated like a joke. The final realization. That night, after we got home from the restaurant, I didn't say anything. I simply went through the motions, locked the doors, turned off the lights, climbed into bed beside a woman who had no real place in my life anymore. Serena didn't say goodnight. She never did. She lay beside me, scrolling through her phone, probably messaging friends about what a pathetic excuse for a man she was married to. And as I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of her notifications, the realization settled over me like ice. This marriage wasn't just broken. It was over. There was nothing to fix. No words to say that would change how she saw me. No actions to take that would make her love me again, if she ever had. And Lily? I had spent years hoping that she wouldn't turn out like her mother. But now, all I could do was make sure she had the chance to see what real integrity looked like. Because if I didn't do something now, if I kept pretending, she would never learn. So, that night, lying in the bed of a woman who didn't love me, living in a house that was no longer a home, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for this marriage. I was going to walk away from it. But I wouldn't just walk away empty-handed. No, I was going to make sure that Serena, and everyone else who had laughed at me, finally learned what life was like without me. After that night at the restaurant, something inside me shifted. It wasn't an explosion of rage or a desperate need for revenge. It was quieter than that, colder. like stepping outside on a winter morning and realizing the air no longer bites because you've already gone numb. I had been the fool for too long. For 10 years, I had been Serena's safety net. Every time she mismanaged the boutique's finances, every time she overspent on things she didn't need, every time she took reckless risks, I fixed it. Every time she insulted me, rolled her eyes at me, treated me like an afterthought, I swallowed it. Every time Lily picked up on her mother's behavior, dismissing me, laughing at me, I ignored it. But that was over now. I didn't tell Serena what I was thinking. She didn't suspect a thing. She was too comfortable, too confident that I would always be there, sitting quietly in the background while she continued to build a life without me, but still off of me. She had no idea what was coming. Step 1. Cutting the money flow. The first thing I did was stop funding her boutique. For years, I had been transferring money into her business account whenever things got tight, covering rent when she forgot, bailing her out when sales didn't meet expectations. I had done it without question because I thought I was supporting my wife. I logged into the account, checked the numbers, and for the first time, really looked at where the money had been going. Luxury handbags, high-end jewelry, expensive spa trips. This wasn't business investment. This was pure indulgence. I stopped all payments that night. The boutique was officially on its own. Step 2. Preparing my exit. While Serena spent her days brunching with her friends, complaining about how hard it was to be a businesswoman while sipping champagne I paid for, I was meeting with lawyers. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted a clean break, and I wanted to ensure that when I walked away, Serena was left standing in ruins. The house? I transferred it into my name alone. Our shared assets? I restructured them, ensuring that anything Serena had access to would be revoked once the divorce was finalized. The credit cards? I prepared to cut them off, but I wasn't done. There was something else, something that had been nagging at me for months. Step 3. Following the money. Serena's boutique had been struggling for a while. Despite all the money I funneled into it, her sales were never as good as she claimed. So where was the money going? I decided to dig deeper. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A hidden account. And on that account, 2 names. Serena's and another man's. At first, I thought maybe she was just saving for herself, preparing for the day she finally left me. But then I saw the withdrawals. Not just by her, by him. And that's when I recognized the name. Brandon, her so-called business consultant. The man she had sworn was just a friend. The same man I had caught her texting late at night, only for her to roll her eyes and tell me I was being insecure. The same man she had insisted was helping her boutique grow. Now I knew the truth. She wasn't just taking from me. She was building a life with someone else, using my money to do it. Step 4. The setup. Confronting her right away would have been too easy. No, I needed a plan. I needed to be patient. I let her think I was still the same man, still the clueless, dependable husband who would always be there to clean up her messes. She didn't suspect a thing. She didn't even notice the changes. Didn't notice when I began withdrawing control over the finances. Didn't notice when I started documenting every transaction, every financial move she made. Didn't notice that I was preparing to pull the rug out from under her. And the best part? Neither did Brandon. Because while Serena had been spending my money on him, I had done my research, and I had found out something interesting. Brandon had more to lose than I thought. I sat back, staring at the pile of evidence I had collected. This wasn't just going to be a divorce. This was going to be destruction, and I was going to make sure Serena and Brandon felt every single second of it. A few weeks after that dinner, everything started falling into place. The more I dug into Serena's financials, the clearer the picture became. She had never planned on staying with me. At some point, maybe years ago, she had already decided I was nothing more than a stepping stone, a source of money and stability until she no longer needed me. And Brandon? He wasn't just some random consultant. He was the next step in her plan. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated me. For years, I had played the role of the passive husband, the provider, the man who kept his head down and his wallet open. She had assumed I would never look closely, never question her, never investigate. And because of that assumption, she had left trails. The first discovery, the secret account. It all started with the bank transfers. I had gone through the boutique's finances, but something wasn't adding up. The business was supposedly thriving, at least, according to Serena, but the books showed a different story. There were withdrawals happening in large amounts, but not going toward inventory, rent, or anything related to the store. The money was being funneled into a private account. At first, I assumed it was just Serena hoarding cash, preparing for the day she decided to finally leave me. But the more I dug, the more I found Brandon's name tied to it. He wasn't just a consultant. He was taking money from her. From me. The second discovery, the luxury lifestyle. I started tracking her spending. Every transaction. Every late-night withdrawal. Every business trip she claimed was necessary for the boutique. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Serena wasn't investing in her store. She was investing in Brandon. She had paid off his debts. She had co-signed a lease for a new apartment under his name. She had bought him watches, clothes, luxury items, all on my dime. The boutique wasn't just a front for her fake career. It was her personal ATM for their affair. The third discovery, the affair. I knew she was cheating. The bank statements were damning enough, but I needed more. Something undeniable. So I got proof. I hired a private investigator. Someone discreet. Someone good. Within days, I had photos. Serena, smiling across the table at a fancy restaurant. Serena, leaning in close to Brandon, their hands touching in a way that wasn't just friendly. Serena, going up to his apartment at midnight and not leaving until morning. That was all I needed. The setup begins. Once I had the evidence, the next step was setting everything in motion. I couldn't just confront her. That would be letting her off too easy. No, I needed to wait for the perfect moment. While Serena went about her days, oblivious to what I knew, I continued making my moves behind the scenes. 1. Cutting off the boutique. The next rent payment bounced. Serena didn't notice right away. She assumed it was a bank issue. But when she called them, she was told there had been a change. The account that had always been there for her was suddenly empty. The boutique, the one she had spent years claiming was all hers, it was now a financial disaster. She called me that night, her voice sharp with irritation. I don't know what's going on, but there's something wrong with my business account. I played dumb. That's odd. Maybe you should check your spending. I could hear her seething through the phone. She was starting to panic. 2. Freezing the credit cards. She had no idea that the next morning, all of her credit cards would stop working. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. I removed her as an authorized user, cut off every line of credit she relied on. The first time she tried to swipe a card and got declined, I knew she'd assume it was a mistake. The second time, she would start to worry. By the third time, she would be in full-blown meltdown mode. 3. Taking the house out of her hands. For years, Serena had acted like our house was hers, like she had earned it, like it was some trophy for her to enjoy. But in reality, her name was never on it. She had never checked, never cared, never imagined a world where she wouldn't have everything handed to her. Until now, while she was still busy figuring out why she was suddenly broke, I finalized the last legal move, transferring every property, every car, everything of value into my name alone. It was airtight. She wouldn't even realize what I had done until it was too late. 4. Exposing Brandon's weakness. I had more than enough proof of their affair, but I wanted one final move. I dug into Brandon's financials. Turns out, he was in more debt than I had realized. And more importantly, he had business dealings that wouldn't survive a scandal. So I made sure he knew exactly what I had on him. A simple email. No threats. No dramatics. Just the cold, hard truth. With an attachment full of evidence. I knew what would happen next. He would panic. He would distance himself from Serena. And he would disappear, leaving her to deal with the fallout alone. The perfect timing. Everything was set. Serena had no idea that her world was about to collapse. The boutique? Crashing. The credit cards? Gone. The house? No longer hers. Her affair? About to implode. And me? I was ready to watch it all burn. She had spent years building her life on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Now, she was about to experience what it felt like to lose everything. And the best part? She wouldn't see it coming. Serena was too comfortable, too confident. She had spent years living under the assumption that I would always be there, always paying, always fixing, always cleaning up the messes she left behind. But she had no idea that her safety net had already been cut. I wasn't the weak man she thought I was. I was the storm she didn't see coming. For the past few weeks, I had been preparing for this moment. The moment she realized that everything she had taken for granted was gone. I wasn't going to just leave her. I was going to leave her with nothing. And I was going to watch her fall. The first sign of trouble. The cracks in Serena's world started small. Her boutique's rent payment bounced. She didn't realize it right away. She was too busy posting curated photos of herself sipping wine at a rooftop brunch. Too busy showing off the success she thought she had built for herself. But then, the landlord called. At first, she must have assumed it was a mistake. She tried to make another payment. Declined. That was when panic started to set in. That night, she stormed into my home office, her face twisted with frustration. "Why is my boutique's account empty?" she snapped. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. I had waited for this moment. "What do you mean?" I asked, playing dumb. "You know damn well what I mean," she shrieked, waving her phone in my face. "The money is gone. My business accounts are locked. My cards aren't working. What the hell did you do?" I kept my expression blank. "I didn't do anything, Serena. Maybe you should check your spending." Her hands clenched into fists. "Don't gaslight me. I know you had something to do with this." I shrugged. "It's not my business, remember? It's yours." For the first time in years, she didn't have a comeback. She had no idea how deep this went. No idea what was coming next. The credit card meltdown. The next day, Serena tried to go shopping. Her usual routine. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Never once stopping to think about the fact that none of it was hers. Until, declined. She tried again. Declined. The panic hit her fast. She called the bank, demanding to know why her credit card wasn't working. The answer? Her name had been removed from all accounts. No more luxury shopping sprees. No more expensive brunches. No more acting like she was better than everyone else when her entire life had been funded by someone else. I checked my phone and saw the missed calls. 1, 2, 3. Then, a text. "Call me now." I put my phone down and went back to work. I was in no rush. Brandon's disappearance. While Serena was busy scrambling to figure out why her money had vanished, another problem was brewing. Brandon. The moment he received my email, the one full of evidence, he did exactly what I expected. He ran. Blocked Serena's number. Deleted his social media. Vanished. Because unlike her, he knew when he had lost. He knew I had enough to ruin him, and he wasn't about to go down with her. I could only imagine how Serena felt when she realized she had lost everything. And now, she was alone. The moment she realized. By the third day, she had no choice but to come crawling back to me. She didn't knock. She barged into my office, slamming the door behind her. "Fix it." I didn't look up from my computer. "Fix what?" "You know what," she snapped, stepping closer. "The boutique, the credit cards, the house." She stopped, because in that moment, she realized. Her face went pale. "The house," she whispered, her voice cracking. I finally looked at her. "It's not yours, Serena." Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to argue. But the truth had already sunk in. She had never bothered to check. Never bothered to ask whose name was really on the house, the investments, the assets. Because she had always assumed it would be hers. That I would just hand it over. That I would be too weak to fight back. "You!" She shook her head, stumbling backward. "You can't do this." I already did. Tears welled in her eyes. Not because she had lost me. Not because she was sorry. But because she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. The final blow. Serena wasn't stupid. She knew the kind of person she had been, but she had never thought it would come back to destroy her. I watched as her expression shifted from shock to horror to fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice shaking. "You're nothing without me." I laughed, because that was the biggest lie of all. "You're wrong, Serena." I stood up, walking past her, heading toward the door. "You were nothing without me." I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I had one, and she knew it. The beginning of the end. Serena had spent years taking from me, disrespecting me, treating me like a joke. Now, she was about to learn what life was like without me. No money, no status, no Brandon, just herself and the choices she made. And the best part? This wasn't even the worst of it. Not yet. Serena had never known true struggle. For years, she had lived under the illusion that everything in her life had been earned, that her boutique, her social status, her lavish lifestyle were all results of her own hard work. She had convinced herself that I was the burden, the quiet, boring man in the background who simply funded her ambitions while being mocked for my efforts. She never once considered that without me, her world would crumble. But now, as the consequences of her actions closed in on her, she was learning just how much she had taken for granted. And the fall? It had only just begun. The boutique collapses. The first domino to fall was her boutique. After her landlord rejected the bounced rent payment, Serena spent the next few days frantically trying to fix the situation. She tried calling the bank, demanding to know why her account had suddenly dried up. She tried swiping her cards, only to find out that every single one of them had been declined. She tried borrowing money from friends, but they had already heard the rumors. Because while she had been busy trying to keep up appearances, her so-called friends had been talking. And when wealthy socialites talk, word spreads fast. The whispers had begun. Did you hear about Serena? Her boutique is shutting down. I thought she was successful? No, apparently, it was her husband's money all along. She had built her identity around status, around the illusion that she was self-made, that she was better than everyone else. Now, she was just another woman with nothing to show for herself. Brandon disappears. Serena could have handled losing the boutique. She would have thrown a fit, cried to the right people, manipulated someone into feeling sorry for her. But what she wasn't prepared for, what truly sent her into a spiral, was Brandon's disappearance. I had been waiting for it. I had known the moment he received my email, he would do exactly what men like him always did, run. And I was right. I pictured the moment in my head. Serena, desperate and humiliated, reaching for her phone, calling Brandon, thinking he would be her lifeline, only to hear, this number is no longer in service. She probably tried texting, blocked, checking his Instagram, gone. Brandon had cut all ties. And why wouldn't he? He had used Serena just like she had used me. The moment she became a liability, he vanished. Because now, Serena had nothing left to give him. No more money, no more security, no more future. She was alone. And for the first time in years, she had no one to blame but herself. The social collapse. Serena had always believed she was at the center of her social circle. She thought she was the envied one, the woman everyone admired. But she had never realized the truth. Her friends weren't real. They tolerated her because she had status, because she threw expensive parties, picked up the bill at restaurants, invited them on lavish vacations. Without those things, she was nothing to them. And the moment her financial troubles became public, they turned on her. It started with a few ignored calls, then a few canceled plans. And before she knew it, she was on the outside. Whispers followed her everywhere. She's bankrupt. Her husband left her. She was cheating, you know? Her reputation, the thing she valued most, was in shambles. And there was no coming back from it. The desperate plea. By the end of the week, Serena had finally run out of options. She had lost everything. And she had no choice but to crawl back to me. I had been expecting it. I knew she would show up at the house she once claimed was hers. Sure enough, I heard the knock on my door late that evening. It wasn't her usual entitled knock. It was hesitant, weak. I opened the door and saw her standing there. She looked nothing like the woman I had married. Her makeup, once flawless, was smudged. Her designer outfit, always perfectly put together, looked wrinkled and hastily thrown on. And her eyes? They weren't full of arrogance anymore. They were full of fear. "We need to talk," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I leaned against the doorframe. About what? Her lips parted slightly, like she didn't know what to say. She swallowed hard. I made a mistake. I let out a low laugh. Which one? She flinched. For a second, just a second, I saw genuine regret in her eyes. But I knew it wasn't because she had hurt me. It was because she had lost. Just, can we talk inside? She tried. For Lily's sake? Lily. The one card she thought she could still play. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. No. She blinked. What? You heard me. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. You don't live here anymore, Serena. This house isn't yours. Nothing here belongs to you. Her breath hitched. I don't know where to go, she admitted, voice cracking. For a split second, the old me, the man who had spent years cleaning up her messes, almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered. The laughs at my expense. The eye rolls. The way she let Lily mock me. I took a slow breath and gave her the only answer she truly deserved. That's not my problem. Then I shut the door in her face. And I didn't look back. The beginning of the end. Serena had spent years thinking she was untouchable. She had believed she could do whatever she wanted, take from whoever she pleased, walk over people without consequence. But now, she had lost everything. The boutique? Gone. Brandon? Gone. Her social life? Destroyed. Her home? No longer hers. And me? I had never felt freer. I had spent years wondering what my life would be like without Serena. Now, I finally knew. And for the first time in a long time, I was happy. For years, Serena had thrived on perception. She wasn't just a woman with a boutique. She was a brand. She had carefully curated an image of success, of elegance, of effortless luxury. To the outside world, she was a self-made entrepreneur, a woman who had everything under control. But now, that world was turning on her. When Serena lost her money, when Brandon disappeared, when her boutique collapsed, she assumed she could still recover, that she could manipulate the situation, spin a new story, salvage the pieces. She was wrong. The moment people smelled weakness, they pounced. And the same friends who had once laughed with her, who had adored her lavish lifestyle, who had benefited from her spending, they were the first to tear her down. The backlash begins. It started as whispers, small, passing comments at social events, hushed conversations behind her back. Then, those whispers turned into full-blown gossip. She tried to act as if she was still in control, tried to post old pictures on social media, pretending life was still glamorous, still exclusive. But people weren't buying it anymore. The comments started. Didn't she just lose her boutique? I heard her husband left her and took everything. Wasn't she cheating? Her carefully built empire of lies was crumbling in real time, and she couldn't stop it. She tried reaching out to friends, the ones she had spent years impressing. But suddenly, they weren't answering. Suddenly, plans were being made without her. She had been cut out, and in her world, exclusion was a death sentence. The moment it went public, Serena was desperate to control the damage. But then, something happened that she hadn't anticipated. Someone, maybe one of her former friends, maybe someone who just wanted to see the drama unfold, leaked everything. And when it hit the internet, it spread like wildfire. A blog post surfaced on a gossip site. From high society to rock bottom, how a boutique queen lost everything overnight. The article exposed it all. Her failing boutique, her money troubles, the affair, Brandon's disappearance, the fact that she had been completely cut off by her ex-husband. It was merciless. There were screenshots of social media posts, her old captions bragging about wealth, about loyalty, about knowing your worth. And below them, comments from people who had once admired her. Oh, how the tables have turned. Maybe she should have been a better wife instead of spending her husband's money. This is what happens when you think you're too good for everyone else. Her entire reputation shattered. And the worst part? She couldn't escape it. The breakdown. The first time I saw Serena after the scandal broke, she looked unrecognizable. The once polished, arrogant woman who used to walk around with her head held high was gone. Her hair wasn't styled. Her clothes weren't designer. Her nails weren't manicured. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. And for the first time ever, She didn't look at me with mockery or disgust. She looked at me with defeat. I wasn't surprised when she showed up at my house again. She was out of options. No money, no business, no social life, no one left to use. She had no other choice but to come back to the one person she had spent years degrading. I opened the door and saw her standing there, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands shaking. "I don't know what to do," she said softly. "That's not my problem." She let out a bitter laugh, but it was empty. She knew. She knew she had no power anymore. "Lily," she started. "Lily is fine." I cut her off. "She still has a home. She still has stability. The only person suffering here is you." Serena swallowed hard. I never thought. I tilted my head. Never thought what? That it would end like this. I studied her for a long moment. Then, I said the words I had been waiting years to say. "It ended the moment you decided I wasn't worth respecting." She flinched. "So what do you expect me to do?" she asked. "Survive." Then, without another word, I shut the door. This time, she didn't knock again. The aftermath. Serena's fall from grace was complete. She had spent years treating me like I was nothing. Now, she was the one who had nothing. She had spent years acting like she was better than everyone else. Now, she was forgotten. And me? For the first time in a long time, I was free. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to ruin her life. She had done that all on her own. The world had finally seen her for what she truly was. And now, she had to live with it. The moment had arrived. The papers sat on my desk, thick, official, and final. I had waited for this, prepared for it. And yet, as I stared down at the divorce documents, I felt no anger, no regret, just relief. Serena had spent years treating me like an afterthought, assuming I would always be there, always willing to clean up her messes. She was about to find out just how wrong she had been. I called her, keeping my voice neutral. "We need to meet. Today." There was silence for a moment before she responded, her voice hesitant. "About what?" "You know what? The last meeting." I chose a neutral location, a quiet, upscale cafe that Serena once loved, back when she still pretended to be in love with me. I arrived first, ordered a coffee, and waited. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Serena had always been the kind of woman who commanded attention, not just because she was beautiful, but because she carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her something. But today, her hair was tied up in a loose bun, without the usual flawless styling. She wore sunglasses, as if trying to hide from the world. Her designer handbag was gone, replaced by something simple, probably one of the few things she had left. And for the first time ever, she wasn't overdressed. She looked small, defeated. She sat down across from me, folding her hands on the table. "What's this about?" I slid the divorce papers across to her. "Sign them." She flinched, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the documents. She flipped through them, scanning the pages. I could tell the moment she saw what I had included. Her lips parted, her eyes widening slightly. "You're not giving me anything?" "Nothing," I confirmed. She swallowed. "But what about Lily?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Lily will be taken care of. But you?" I shook my head. "You're on your own." She let out a small, humorless laugh. "You're punishing me." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "No, I'm just giving you exactly what you deserve." Her eyes flickered with something. Anger, pain, regret, maybe all of it. "I made mistakes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I tilted my head. "Oh, now you realize that?" She exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the table. "I never thought you'd actually leave me with nothing." I shrugged. "You never thought I'd leave you at all." Silence stretched between us. I could see her mind racing, searching for something. A way out, a way back, a way to manipulate me one last time. But she had nothing left to bargain with. She wasn't the powerful, untouchable woman she once pretended to be. She was just alone. Her last attempt. She sighed, tapping her fingers against the table. "What if we," she hesitated, "what if we tried to fix this?" I raised an eyebrow. "Fix this?" She nodded quickly, desperate now. We could go to counseling. Start over. I know I made mistakes, but I cut her off with a chuckle. She stared at me. What's so funny? You, I said simply. You really think that after everything you've done, you can just say a few nice words and I'll take you back? Her jaw clenched. It's not like that, she insisted. It's exactly like that. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Tell me, Serena, do you actually miss me? Or do you just miss the life you had with me? She didn't answer, because she knew the truth. And so did I. She didn't miss me. She missed the money, the status, the security. Without me, she was nothing. And she couldn't handle it. The signature that ended everything. She sighed heavily, her fingers tightening around the pin. If I sign this, what happens next? You move on with your life, I said simply. And I move on with mine. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the pen to the paper. And then, she signed. Just like that, it was over. She sat there for a moment, staring at the papers, as if she could somehow undo what had just happened. So that's it, she whispered. That's it, I said. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. I never thought you'd actually leave me. That's the problem, I said, standing up. You never thought. And with that, I walked away. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't say another word. Because for the first time in her life, she knew. She had lost. The freedom of letting go. I stepped outside, inhaling the crisp air. For the first time in years, I felt light. No more disrespect. No more manipulation. No more being treated like an afterthought. Serena had spent a decade using me, belittling me, treating me like I was nothing. And now, she was the one sitting alone in that cafe, realizing she had thrown away the best thing she ever had. I didn't need to ruin her. She had done that all by herself. And me? I was finally free. Free to rebuild my life. Free to be happy. Free to move forward without her. And that was better than any revenge. The ink on the divorce papers had barely dried, yet the weight of it had already lifted from my shoulders. I had walked away from Serena without looking back, but I knew she wouldn't let go that easily. People like her, people who lived off control, off manipulation, off the backs of others, didn't just accept defeat. Still, I wasn't worried. She had nothing left to use against me. No money, no power, no hold over me. For the first time in 10 years, I was free. But freedom wasn't just about leaving her. It was about rebuilding myself. Lily's cold distance. There was only one thing that still weighed on me. Lily. She had been raised watching her mother mock me, disrespect me, treat me as if I were disposable. And though I knew she was just a child, children learn what they see. I saw the shift in her after the divorce was finalized. Her once warm hugs turned into quick, hesitant gestures. Her bright laughter around me became quiet indifference. And worst of all, the way she looked at me, not with love, not even with sadness, with resentment, like I was the one who had ruined everything, like I was the one who had left. I knew exactly where that came from. Serena. She had lost everything, but she still had one card left to play, and she was using it. The manipulation continues. One evening, as I was dropping Lily off at Serena's temporary apartment, an average, far less luxurious place than she was used to, Lily hesitated before getting out of the car. Are you happy now? She asked quietly, not looking at me. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? She fiddled with the strap of her backpack. Mom says you wanted this, that you didn't care about keeping us together. I felt my jaw tighten. Of course, Serena had spun the narrative in her favor. In her story, I was the selfish one, the one who took everything from her, who left their perfect family for no reason at all. She wasn't telling Lily about the affair. She wasn't telling her about Brandon. She wasn't telling her how she had laughed in my face while taking my money and disrespecting me every step of the way. No, she was playing the victim. I took a slow breath, trying to choose my words carefully. Lily, I said gently, I love you more than anything, but sometimes keeping a family together isn't about living in the same house. It's about respect. And your mother, she didn't respect me. She frowned, as if trying to process it. But she said you wanted to get rid of her. I wanted to get rid of the way she treated me. Lily looked out the window, clearly struggling. I couldn't blame her. Her world had been flipped upside down, and the person who should have been helping her understand it was instead poisoning her against me. Mom says she lost everything because of you, she muttered. I sighed, gripping the steering wheel. She lost everything because she took me for granted, and now she's mad she can't use me anymore. Lily bit her lip, silent for a long moment. Then, without another word, she grabbed her backpack, opened the door, and walked into the apartment without looking back. And for the first time since this started, I felt a pain deeper than anything Serena had ever done to me, because Serena had already lost everything. But now, she was trying to make me lose Lily too. The lies start falling apart. I knew I couldn't force Lily to see the truth. Serena's manipulation was strong, but it was built on lies. And lies always collapse. It didn't take long for Lily to start noticing things on her own. The way Serena complained constantly about not having money, but refused to get a real job. The way she blamed me for everything, yet had no explanation for why I had left in the first place. The way her once endless social circle had vanished overnight. Lily wasn't stupid. She had her mother's sharp mind. But she also had my ability to see through bullshit. And eventually, she started asking questions. Real questions. Mom, why did you and Dad really get divorced? Mom, why does Dad say you didn't respect him? Mom, why did you lose your boutique if you were so successful? Serena tried to deflect, tried to dodge. But the thing about children is that they can tell when they're being lied to. Lily wasn't fully on my side yet, but she was thinking, and that was enough. For now. The shift in power. One afternoon, Serena called me. Her voice wasn't arrogant anymore. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't even angry. It was desperate. Lily wants to spend more time at your place. I smirked. There it was. The moment Serena realized she wasn't in control anymore. Okay, I said simply. Is that all you have to say? She snapped. What else is there? She inhaled sharply. I don't get it. How did everything turn out like this? How did I lose everything? I thought about her mocking laughter at the restaurant, about her affair with Brandon, about the years of disrespect. Because you thought you were untouchable, Serena, I said finally. You thought you could do whatever you wanted, and I'd always be there. You thought I was weak, but I wasn't weak. Then what were you? She whispered. I smiled. Patient. And with that, I hung up. The new beginning. Lily started spending more time at my house. Not because I forced her. Not because of court orders or fights. But because she chose to. She started seeing me as her father again. Not just the man her mother had turned into a joke. And Serena? She had to live with what she had done. She had lost the money. She had lost her friends. And now? She was losing Lily too. Because at the end of the day, the truth always wins. And Serena's truth? She had destroyed herself. It had been months since I signed the divorce papers. Months since I shut the door on Serena's manipulations, her lies, her arrogance. Months since I had finally taken back my dignity and my life. And now? Now, I was free. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't walking on eggshells in my own home. I wasn't listening to Serena's sharp, belittling remarks. I wasn't spending my hard-earned money on someone who only saw me as a paycheck. I had peace, and she had nothing. Serena's new reality. Serena's downfall wasn't loud. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was slow, painful. Her boutique was gone. The lease had been terminated, the store gutted, the fancy sign with her name on it taken down. The space had already been rented out to someone new. Real entrepreneur who actually knew how to run a business. Her social circle? Non-existent. The moment she stopped being useful, the people she called friends dropped her without hesitation. No one invited her to brunches anymore. No one cared about her complaints. She was an outsider in the world she once ruled. And worst of all, she was broke. She wasn't homeless, not yet. But without my money funding her lifestyle, she had to downgrade. The penthouse she once bragged about? Gone. The designer wardrobe? Sold piece by piece to stay afloat. The expensive jewelry? Pawned off. And as much as she tried to keep up appearances, the cracks in her perfect image were obvious. She had fallen, and no one was there to catch her. Lily's realization. Lily had started spending more and more time with me. It hadn't been easy at first. Serena had done her best to poison our daughter against me, painting me as the villain in her sad little story. But kids are smart. And as the months passed, Lily began to see the truth. She saw how I lived, not in extravagance, but in stability. A real home, a real job, real peace. She saw the difference between my life and her mother's. Serena had never changed. She was still bitter, still resentful, still blaming everyone but herself. And Lily noticed. One night, as I was tucking her into bed at my house, she looked up at me, her young face full of questions she had been too scared to ask before. "Did Mom really love you?" she asked softly. I hesitated. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that the woman who gave birth to her had never been capable of real love? "I think your mother loved what I gave her," I said carefully. "But love isn't just about what someone can do for you. It's about respect. And she didn't respect me, Lily." She nodded slowly, as if finally understanding. "I think you're happier now," she whispered. I smiled. "I am." And for the first time, she smiled back. That was all I needed. The final encounter. I ran into Serena by accident a few weeks later. I was at a cafe, grabbing a coffee, when I saw her sitting at a corner table, staring at her phone. She looked tired, not in the way she used to, after long nights of partying or shopping sprees. She looked exhausted in her soul. Her hair, once always styled to perfection, was tied back messily. She wore simple clothes, no longer drowning in luxury brands. For a moment, I almost felt pity, but then I remembered. The years of mockery, the laughter at my expense, the betrayal. And just like that, the pity vanished. She must have felt my eyes on her, because she looked up. For a second, just a second, I saw hope in her expression. Maybe she thought I would talk to her. Maybe she thought I would offer to help. Maybe she thought I would still be the man who always bailed her out. But I wasn't that man anymore. I nodded once, just an acknowledgement. Nothing more. Then, I turned away and walked out. That was the last time I ever saw her. The best revenge. I never had to destroy Serena. I never had to ruin her life. She did it all by herself. She had taken everything for granted, assuming I would always be there, always paying, always tolerating her cruelty. She thought I was weak. She thought she would never lose. But in the end, she lost everything. And me? I walked away with my dignity, my peace, and my freedom. That was all I ever needed. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's watching someone realize they destroyed themselves. And as I built my new life, without her shadow hanging over me, I finally understood what happiness felt like. I had one. And Serena? She was nothing more than a cautionary tale.